All right, what's good, everybody? Come on in. Going to give it a few seconds. All right, let me know you're live in the chat. Let me know how your weekend was. Mine was pretty good, kind of low key. Just did a lot of writing, catching up on a lot of stuff. All right. All right, welcome to another episode of A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles, where we prefer truth over narrative and principles over politics. We're going to talk about some stuff today. It's going to be fun. We're going to have a good time. And yeah. Now, before I get started, if you want to support my work, as always, please like this video. Please share this video. And if you haven't already subscribed, hit that subscribe button. 3 things. That's it. And for a lot of you, just 2 things because you've already subscribed. But yes, that will help me out a lot. And I really, really appreciate it. And if you want to support my work, you can, the links are in the show notes. If you want to do a one-time donation, links are here too. So hit me up. Also, you can leave me a super chat, which also helps as well. So I appreciate all of you. And you know I can't get started with any of this stuff. I can't even make a move until I let you know that LibertyNation.com is a proud sponsor of A Fresh Perspective. Check out LibertyNation.com for all of your conservatarian news, original articles and analysis, videos, podcasts, Liberty Nation Radio, and their signature TV program, The Conservative 5, all on LibertyNation.com, conservative news where truth matters. All right. So I've got some stuff to talk about today, as usual. Pretty interesting stuff. By the way, to let you know, I am very close to finally obtaining my license to carry license. I took the shooting test on, was that yesterday? Yeah, that was yesterday. And I did pretty well, although, the test is pretty easy, so don't be too impressed. They don't make it very hard at all. This is Texas, after all. They want people to be able to carry. So, but nevertheless, I still did well. I'm proud of myself, pat myself on the back. And Wednesday, I just have one more thing to finish up. And then in a few weeks, I will receive my license in the mail. So I am jazzed about it. And I've been practicing at the range, which has been fun. I wish I could actually do it more often. But, the price of ammo and me being busy, it's not happening. But I do still plan to go at least once or twice a week. So I really want to make sure that I am proficient in using the weapon. And I want to look into other trainings as well. A lot of you have given me some very wonderful suggestions. So I appreciate that. But I will keep you updated on that as always, because I'm having fun and I'm already eyeing my next gun. I don't know if I think I did announce. No, actually, I don't think I did announce which one I wanted. I think I kind of talked about the brand a little bit, but yeah, when I get my next one, you guys it'll be fun. It'll be good stuff. It'll be soon too. Now then, let's talk about the Jedi. And normally I don't write on stuff like, well, yeah, I kind of do sometimes, but some things are just so stupid, so utterly ignorant that I have to address it. So I wrote up a piece about this. And I'm sure some of you even saw other stories about it. But Scientific American, a once respected scientific news outlet, I'm sure it's still respected, whatever. But they posted this article about Star Wars and specifically about the Jedi and essentially about how these things aren't woke enough for their liking. Now, I will say that over the years, I have seen a lot of criticism coming from the hard left about Star Wars because they claim that it promotes stereotypes and it's sexist and it's ableist and it's all the istophobes and all that stuff. 90% of their criticisms are completely erroneous. And when I read this piece, it reminded me, I almost thought it was a hoax because if you recall, Peter Boghossian and James Lindsay, and a couple of other academics, they literally made up ridiculous studies to get them published in progressive academic publications. And they actually succeeded. Like they did a whole fake study about rape culture amongst dogs. Like that's the level of stupid that they were doing with this, but they used the right terminology and they made their case. And even though it was a hoax, it got accepted. So when I read this article, it reminded me of that, except the difference is that these people actually mean this BS that they're talking about. So here's the thing. So they published a piece that was complaining about the Jedi. And if you follow me, you know about Star Wars. You know I love Star Wars. I'm a big Star Wars nerd. I think it's great. I've loved it since I was a kid. Very entertaining, except for The Lost Jedi. That was trash. But everything else has been at least okay. Now, the Jedi, as you know, it's an order of mystic individuals who promote peace and justice in the galaxy, and they're known because of their ability to use the Force. You know, you've heard the phrase, may the Force be with you. You see Luke Skywalker, Master Yoda, Obi-Wan Kenobi, they all know how to use the Force. They can lift things with their minds. They can do all kinds of tricks. They fight with lightsabers. That's who the Jedi are, right? But I can tell from a lot of the criticism that these authors made that they don't really know much about the folklore surrounding Star Wars. Maybe they've seen the original trilogy, and maybe they've seen the prequels, but they don't seem to know much about this universe at all. Maybe some do, but for the most part, it's clear that they don't. So what they're addressing in this article is an issue in the world of academia. And so there is an acronym that is used to describe justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Jedi. So if you spell that out, Jedi, Jedi, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And it's been used by what they say is, quote, employed by a growing number of prominent institutions and organizations. And they're usually used to promote these four principles in, say, the classroom, or in a business, or in a movement, or in activism overall. The acronym is used to express the reality that people are trying to promote: justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Now, I'm not going to speak on those four things because that's not really what this is about. But suffice it to say, that's what they use this acronym for. And yes, they did use this acronym on purpose because they do want to associate it with the Jedi, because the Jedi are the good guys in Star Wars. Although some might disagree with that. I might have some challenges for that, but that's getting a little bit too deep. But again, it's to promote ideas that will lead to more equality. Now, a lot of this is hard leftist stuff, so they want equality of outcome, not equality of opportunity. But these words can also be used in a sense that is more productive as well. So I don't write this off just because the hard left uses it in a way that's destructive, because these elements, I mean, who's going to disagree with the concept of justice? Most people don't even disagree with diversity or inclusion or equity in the way that others people mean it. But that's what this is used to describe. Anyway, I'm getting off track here. So they were complaining that using that acronym was problematic because the Jedi are not as woke as they would like them to be. So the authors, there was four authors in the academic world who exemplify what Malcolm Muggeridge said when he was talking about people being educated into imbecility. They embody that notion. So they start out, quote, through its connections to Star Wars, the name Jedi can inadvertently associate our justice work with stories and stereotypes that are a galaxy far, far away from the values of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. The question we must ask is whether the conversations started by these connections are the ones we want to have. So then after that, it describes the Jedi as, quote, a religious order of intergalactic police monks prone to white saviorism and toxically masculine approaches to conflict resolution. In parentheses, they put violent duels with phallic lightsabers, gaslighting by means of Jedi mind tricks. Yeah, they actually wrote this, guys. I'm not making this up. I forgot to put the link in there, but I'll do it after. Read the article yourself. I'm not making this up. They actually accuse a Jedi of being prone to white saviorism, and they're also guilty of toxic masculinity, because a lot of times they have to use violence to resolve situations. And wait, and the beautiful part about it is that they describe their lightsabers as phallic. What kind of depraved person do you have to be to see a Jedi turn on a lightsaber and you're thinking about something else? Like, what is wrong with these people? And then, of course, gaslighting by means of Jedi mind tricks. When Obi-Wan Kenobi mind tricked the stormtroopers who were looking for the droids, they're like, these aren't the droids you're looking for. Yes, that's what they're talking about. So because they're bad because they gaslight in that way because they want to save the galaxy. But I'm going to address that in a little bit. The article goes on. And do I want to read this whole thing? Let's see. Yeah, I guess I have to. So this was like the major passage of the article. So the authors write, quote, "The Jedi are also an exclusionary cult, membership to which is partly predicated on the possession of heightened psychic and physical abilities or force sensitivity. Strikingly, force-wielding talents are narratively explained in Star Wars not merely in spiritual terms, but also in ableist and eugenic ones." And they continue, as an example, quote, "These supernatural powers are naturalized as biological hereditary attributes. So it is that force potential is framed as a dynastic property of noble bloodlines, for example, the Skywalker dynasty. And force disparities are rendered innate physical properties, measurable via midi-chlorian counts." So there's a genetic aspect to it here. So there's a lot in that passage. And again, I'm going to knock all this stuff down in a second. The article continues. They claim that the Star Wars franchise has been critiqued for promoting, quote, sexism, racism, and ableism. And as an example, they refer to Princess Leia. Remember when they were captured by Jabba the Hutt and she was wearing that scanty slave costume, which all of us men loved. So, whatever. I'll just put that out there. But remember, she was scantily clad in that outfit before they escaped, and she ends up killing him. And they complain that they basically stripped down the series' first leading woman and relegated her to her femininity or define her by her body, which is not true, because if you look at the rest of the entirety of the franchise, she is very much a strong female character that really isn't about focusing on her body. It was just in that one moment because she was captured by a pig named Jabba the Hutt. So if anything, that says something about him, not necessarily about her. But here's what it gets worse, guys. It gets even worse. The authors also say that the franchise conflates alienness with, quote, non-whiteness and promotes, quote, racist stereotypes when they portray non-humans. Then the authors claim that the movies push what they call, quote, ableist tropes. And who do you think they referred to when they talked about ableism, which is basically portraying people who are disabled in a way that is negative? Who is disabled in the Star Wars universe that might fit into this example? Let's see if you guys can guess. I'll give you a couple seconds. Let's see. Nope, nobody. Okay, I'll just go on. I don't want to wait too long. They're talking about Darth Vader, right? The Darth Vader character is ableist. Why? Because they complain that his character, quote, links the villain's physical disability with machinic inhumanity and moral deviance, presenting his technology-assisted breathing as a sinister auditory marker of danger and doom. So by portraying somebody who has a physical disability as an evil person, or intimating that a person with this condition could be a villain, is really making all disabled people look bad, because if we see somebody in a wheelchair, we're automatically going to think of Darth Vader, Lord of the Sith, who killed younglings and did all this horrible stuff. And then they also complained about the fact that the vast majority of the human characters in the Star Wars universe are overwhelmingly, quote, white men. And you know what? I'll give them that one. I'll give them that one. They were right. They're right. It's been a complaint about Star Wars for a long time. It is true. But anybody who's watched the newer movies, whether it's the prequels or even the newer trilogy, they've obviously been trying to fix that, right? George Lucas is not a racist. He didn't do that on purpose because he doesn't like black people, but they are kind of making it more diverse. So no problems there. Lando Calrissian is not the only black guy anymore. He's not the token anymore. There are other black people in the movie. Now, one can argue about how they treated Finn's character, which I can understand, but still, they're trying and they're getting better at that. Now, let's talk about the stupid claims they made. So let's talk about white saviorism. That's what they addressed first. Now, white saviorism, in case you didn't know, is a common trope in films where the minority or the black and brown characters need to be rescued by the white savior who comes in on a white horse and saves them from themselves, or saves them from something evil, because they can't do anything by themselves. They can't excuse me, they can't solve their own problems. They can't fight their own battles. They need that white savior to come in and save the day. The movie Avatar got that complaint quite a bit, I remember. But here's the thing. You only make a claim like that if you don't know Star Wars, if you don't actually pay attention to the universe. Even in the first trilogy, you can see that that's not quite true. But as the story goes on in other movies and other TV shows and comics and books and audio dramas, that ain't true. First off, not all the Jedi are even human. As a matter of fact, there are a lot of non-human Jedi. You've got Master Yoda, you've got Ki-Adi-Mundi, you've got Ahsoka Tano. That's just a few of the Jedi Masters, or Jedi in general, who are aliens, and they kick ass. So it's not just human Jedi who are at stake here. On top of and some of these characters have become pretty important. Yoda is one of the most important characters in the entire Star Wars universe, and Ahsoka Tano is shaping up to be as well. And here's the thing: it's not just the Jedi who actually fight against the Galactic Empire. I mean, in the Rebel Alliance, you had a lot of aliens. I mean, as a matter of fact, the Empire, one of the reasons why it's so portrayed as so evil is because they are bigots. Their entire government is based on bigotry. They don't allow non-humans to get any positions of prominence, except for people like Grand Admiral Thrawn. But in general, the Emperor and the Empire discriminated against non-humans. They would enslave them. They would treat them horribly. That was one way that George Lucas was making a social commentary through Star Wars. There's plenty of other ways as well. But if anything, George Lucas is agreeing with what these hard left wokies would be championing. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on the fact that the Jedi use violence, because that's dumb. I mean, it's an action movie, so violence is going to be a part of it. But anybody who knows the universe knows that Jedi tend to try to resolve conflict without violence. So it's not promoting violence. It's not saying that, it's not trying to convince the American public that violence is a way. That's just stupid. As far as the eugenics reference, I mean, which is very rich coming from people who support abortion, which was originally intended to be eugenics. But I digress. Yeah, in a lot of cases, force sensitivity is passed down through family members. But even more so, and people may not know this if they don't pay attention, because they only focus on the main characters, most force sensitives didn't get it from their parents. How does the Jedi recruit? People when a child is discovered to be force sensitive, they're given to the Jedi at a very young age. That's how it goes. So their parents don't have the ability to use the force, because if they did, they'd be part of the Jedi Order, which means that they're not allowed to procreate. So yes, most Jedi are force sensitive just because they were born that way, not because it was passed down through a dynasty, although it can happen that way too. We saw that in the case of the Skywalkers. and also with Emperor Palpatine, which is a disgusting thought. It's probably the nastiest part of the last movie. But I'm digressing. Now, here's the other thing. Darth Vader, he's ableist. No, he's not. In fact, the fact that he was even disabled and still able to accomplish what he did says something. It says that being disabled doesn't mean you can't still do great things. Now, he did great and horrible things, but he didn't let his disability get him down. I'm sorry, that argument is so stupid. I don't even know why I'm addressing it. Also, the idea that people who are disabled shouldn't be portrayed as villains is comical. I mean, you've probably seen the movie Unbreakable, Mr. Glass. Nobody complained about that. Samuel L. Jackson's character was disabled, and he was a bad guy, and he was a great villain. Nobody cared. I'm actually, if I were to Google that, I would probably find people who were whining about it. So I shouldn't say that nobody was complaining about it, but still, it's condescending, really. I mean, if I were a disabled person, God forbid I don't become one, but if I were, it wouldn't bother me to portray a person who's disabled as a villain. It doesn't bother me to portray a black person as a villain. Mr. Glass was also black. There are a lot of black villains in films and TV shows. You can't just baby people in a way that says, oh, well, they're so downtrodden that if we make them a villain, that's just going to make them feel worse. No, it's that type of paternalism that is common amongst white leftists that pisses me off to no end. And that's why I say that white leftists, especially the women, are the worst. All right. Not all of them, but a lot of them engage in a lot of Karen-esque behavior. Like they get their Karen on way too much. And this article is a Karen article. All right. So what do you guys think? And again, this isn't the most important thing in the world, but I brought it up because I like Star Wars. And Star Wars has become an institution in American society. It is part of the culture, whether we like it or not. I mean, even some of the sayings that come from the movie we use in our everyday lives. Like people talk about, do or do not. There is no try. That kind of thing. So it is part of American culture, and they're trying to bash it for no good reason. So that's why I felt that while it's not the most important issue in the world, it's at least worth discussing for a little bit. So what do you guys think? Rachel D. My baby needed a therapy helmet and surgery, and a friend's son called him a superhero robot. Not ableist at all and made me cry in a good way. Yeah, see? Now, I know that there are jerks out there. I mean, of course there are. There are jerks who would make fun of that. But most people are decent. And I'm pretty sure, again, I doubt that anybody who has a disability, whether they're in a wheelchair or something else, they're not thinking about Darth Vader and how they're being portrayed. It's just, it's absurd. All right. So next, I'm going to talk about woke theology. And, I was thinking for a while, and I was thinking about how wokeism and a lot of the hard left progressive ideology resembles religion. And this is a comparison that's been made a lot of times before. And I was thinking about it, and what kind of popped into my head was while there are a lot of similarities between the people who adhere to wokeism. I mean, it is very much a religious fervor that they cling to a lot of the precepts that come from what I call the woke Sanhedrin. And the woke crowd has their own, religious laws that they live by. I mean, they have their own customs, they have their own morals, and they do resemble religion in a big way. But there is one area where they diverge, and it's an important area because every major religion has this theme in common. They just have different takes on it. And what I'm talking about is the idea of redemption. I would say most of the world's major religions have a narrative or have a belief system that involves redemption as a crucial part of their belief and their attempts to reach God. And so, for instance, Christianity, if you're a Christian, you are redeemed by the blood of Christ. You accept that he sacrificed his life for us. His blood was shed for our sins. And if we believe in his divinity and believe in what he did and believe in who he is, then that is how we are saved, and that is how we end up reaching God. Because of the fact that Adam and Eve sinned, they doomed us to live in a fallen state. And when they sinned in the Garden of Eden, but we have been redeemed through Christ's blood that was spilled for our sake. So that's redemption in Christianity. Islam has their form of redemption as well. And the Islamic tradition argues that redemption comes from what's called tawbah, which is translated as repentance. And you are redeemed when you repent of your sins and you live life as a good Muslim. One of the verses in the Quran says that, quote, Allah loves those who are constantly repentant and loves those who purify themselves. And he also says, Allah, in the Quran, it says that Allah says, quote, but indeed I am the perpetual forgiver of whoever repents and believes and does righteousness, and then continues in guidance. Jewish tradition is similar in that their redemption arc is dependent on, living life the right way. So according to Cambridge Core, it gave this description, quote, in rabbinic Judaism, redemption is conceived of as an earned response. Human beings merit redemption through their good deeds and through their repentance. The dialectic of the covenantal bond of God as a member of the community in relation is nowhere more evident than in the repentance redemption sequence. So those are just three major religious traditions. I'm sure if I looked into Hinduism or Buddhism or others, you find a lot of the same things. Again, the take on redemption is different, but they all have this sense of I need to be redeemed for my sins. If I commit a sin, then that keeps me from getting to God. So in order to get to God, I have to be redeemed. And as a Christian, I believe obviously in the divinity of Jesus. I believe that Jesus paid the price, and I've accepted him, and that's how I get to God. But when it comes to wokeism, when it comes to the woke religion, where is the redemption arc? I couldn't find it. I've never been able to find it. There is no room for redemption in wokeism. There isn't much room for forgiveness, unless it's politically expedient. But in general, these people who adhere to wokeism, almost like they would a religion, are missing this part of it. In fact, the idea of forgiveness for somebody who may have said something that they shouldn't have said, made questionable remarks, or maybe had political beliefs that are not in alignment with progressivism, there's not really a path to redemption there. And you know how it works, and you guys know how this plays out. This plays out in cancel culture, right? A person, like a high-profile individual, it gets revealed that 10 years ago they tweeted something about maybe a racial group or a sexual group or something else, or a religious group, and maybe they are legitimately offensive statements. And it could be something, again, that they posted on social media, or maybe something that they said in an interview or a blog post or whatever. And you know what happens once those things are unearthed, the cancel culture community swiftly metes out its punishment. You've got the social media mobs that try to destroy the person's career. They try to besmirch their reputation, and they basically try to destroy them. Now, they don't always succeed. Especially when it's against a famous person. But as I'm going to talk about in a second, cancel culture isn't just for celebrities anymore. They're using it against people in the workplace. Now, for celebrities, these attacks may not be as devastating. Like I said, they don't always succeed. A lot of times they can come back, not because they got forgiven, but because people just stop paying attention. But when it happens to an ordinary person, it can destroy their lives. If you look at the case of Mark and Patricia McCloskey, remember they had their firearms out in the front of their house while Black Lives Matter protests had broken into their gated community, and they were walking to another house to protest. And obviously they freaked out and they went out in front of their homes with their guns. It wasn't enough just to charge them with a crime, which, by the way, I think was political. I don't necessarily agree with what they did, but it wasn't what the left was trying to make it sound like. I mean, if that happened where I live, I probably wouldn't go out to the front, but I'd have my weapon ready, because you don't know what's going to happen. But they even the McCloskeys own a law firm. I don't know if it's even still in business, but a bunch of leftists went on Yelp to give them one-star ratings and left reviews claiming that they were racist, obviously without any evidence. So you can see how this can affect normal people. I mean, there are stories about, I just wrote one about an organization that is basically a support group for regular people who are in fear of getting canceled or fired from their jobs because maybe they don't agree with all of the elements of the diversity training that they're being subjected to or being forced to attend, or maybe they're being forced to express support for political beliefs that they don't have. So it's a serious issue. And like I said, there is no element of forgiveness, even if you apologize. And it's funny because the people who belong to the woke Sanhedrin will call for an apology and they'll be aggressive about it. But they're calling for an apology that they know they're going to discard, even if their target seems to be genuinely remorseful. Again, there is no path to redemption for those who have transgressed against wokeism. Now, there are some exceptions. If it's politically expedient, they will forgive that person. They won't hold it against them. Look at Joy Reid on MSNBC. All she had to do was lie and say that those homophobic blog posts that she wrote were written by somebody else and that they hacked into her account or whatever. And she still has a job, doesn't she? I mean, in certain cases, I mean, like with Governor Andrew Cuomo, it was expedient to get rid of him and not to accept his apology because it got to the point to where they just couldn't do it anymore. I mean, it was too obvious that he actually did these things. But look at Chris Cuomo, his brother. He's got accusations against him too, and they have proven that he actually did it. Is CNN going to fire him? I don't know. We'll see. I guarantee you that if either of those men had an R next to their names, they would have been gone. That's just the way it is. So, but in general, there is no forgiveness. And that is by design, I believe. It's by design because if you forgive people, then that means that we can actually start to have healthy conversations. If there's somebody who had a faulty belief or maybe made some comments and then they're remorseful about it, that can open up the bridge to where people can say, okay, let's have a conversation about this. It might actually start a conversation between people who disagree with each other politically, but want to actually deal with these issues. And it might cause them to actually sit down and, talk, have a discussion. That's how it works. That's how it should work. But if there's no forgiveness, if you're still going to destroy them no matter what they do, then that keeps up the division. Also, this type of behavior is part of the hard left's political DNA. Again, not just the left, I'm talking about the hard left, like the far left. So this isn't everybody who just votes Democrat. I'm talking about the people who love this cancel culture stuff. They love the idea of ruining somebody's career because they made questionable statements a couple years ago or even just recently. And this type of belief system does not brook any dissent. They're not okay with you expressing a viewpoint that differs from theirs. They don't want to convert people by persuading them and saying, this is why you should believe what we believe. They want to convert people by basically saying, if you speak out against what we're doing, we will destroy you. That's how they work. That's why the wokeism religion cannot have a path to redemption. What do you guys think? Let's see. Just do something really quick. Okay. Hey, what's up, Audrey? Good to see you. All right. I guess it depends on if you see the whole we've got to do the work. You must be an anti-racist type of rhetoric as a path to redemption or not. I don't even think that is. As a matter of fact, I think that the reason, and that was very clever by Ibram X. Kendi to word it that way, because it allows people like him to label people as racist much easier. Because he's right. Most people aren't racist, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to become anti-racist activists. So you can call them racist still by that definition. If you split to where you can only be one or the other, very clever the way he did it. I do admire the hustle there. I don't agree with it. I think it's evil, but very clever way to frame things. Now, will that catch on? It's catching on the hard left. I don't know if it's going to go to the rest of society. I think most people can kind of see what he's doing, but as far as from a persuasion perspective, wasn't a bad idea. Let's see. It is better to not apologize to the wokesters. In general, I would say that's true, but I would say in cases where you actually feel like you did something wrong, then go ahead and apologize. But you're not apologizing for them. You're apologizing for yourself, and you're apologizing for people who are actually approaching the matter in good faith, because they'll accept your apology. It doesn't matter what the hard left thinks. Like if say if that happened to me, which probably wouldn't, but if it happened to me and I actually felt like I said something wrong, then I'd say, you know what, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that, or I didn't mean to put it that way, or I could have communicated that better. And then I'd move on. And the ones who don't like me, they can go do something else. I don't know. Go watch the Young Turks or something. Whatever. It doesn't matter to me. Yeah, and you're right. They want dominance. So all discussion is verboten. Yes. All right. John McWhorter wrote a book titled Woke Racism and described it as a new religion. He argues academics that teach at liberal schools don't speak out because of fear of being fired and not tenured. Yes, exactly. It's designed to instill fear. And I've heard of that book. I do want to read it at some point. Maybe I'll pick it up soon. I need more time to read. Goodness. All right. So I'm going to move on here. But before I do that, just want to remind you to head on over to libertynation.com, proud sponsor of A Fresh Perspective. Now, there's a lot that you can do over at Liberty Nation. As a matter of fact, the article that I just quoted from was written by me for Liberty Nation. So if you want to check it out, go on over to libertynation.com. You'll get analysis without all of the outrage porn. You're going to get a lot of nuanced takes on different issues. Again, we can't write articles unless they have some type of unique spin to it or a unique take. We're not just going to write what everybody else is writing. So you don't have to worry about being stuck in an echo chamber. Yes, it is right-wing opinions. You know, you've got your libertarians, you've got your ANCAPs, which, you know, at some point I might be one of those ANCAPs. You've got traditional Republicans. You've got conservatarians like myself. It's good stuff. You're going to get a wide range of opinions on a wide range of issues. Also good if you like history, because there is a very much an emphasis on the nation's history and how it ties into the issues that we're seeing today, especially when you're looking at, you know, issues pertaining to the Second Amendment, which is what I'm going to talk about next. I'm going to talk about gun control and how gun control was racist and is still racist. It never stopped being racist. It just took on a different form of racism. So I think it's fair to say that most proponents of the Second Amendment understand that the gun control movement in America was very much rooted in racism. It doesn't take much to find this out. You go on Google, you're going to find a lot of history on the subject, even written by left-wing sources. Now, the fact that the gun control movement is racist is why the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, recently tried to sell this fiction that it's actually the creation of the Second Amendment that was racist. That was a blatant attempt to distract from the real history of the gun control movement. I don't think it worked. I think people know it's the only people who believe that were people who don't know anything about guns and don't know anything about the Second Amendment and don't know anything about gun control. So in that aspect, they may have actually been successful with some people. But in general, I don't think that most people are going to buy that, especially when you have people who are able to give the other side of it. Because the very first gun control laws that this country had specifically targeted Black former slaves. They didn't want my ancestors to possess weapons. Now, some of this was done out of fear because they thought that the slaves were going to use those guns to get revenge on their former slave owners or on other white people or what have you. Others, because they didn't want black people to be able to defend themselves from the Ku Klux Klan and other white supremacist groups that would terrorize black people, especially in the South. So those were the very first gun laws. They were part of the black codes that were used to prevent black people from owning guns. Now, a lot of people on the right know this. And again, a lot of people who know history know this. But one of the issues that I don't think is highlighted enough is the fact that these laws never really stopped being racist. The laws, a lot of the legislation that we see on the books at the local level, and even at the state level, are racist. They do have racist outcomes. Now, what I will say is that in this case, I would say most of the people favoring these laws and putting them into place aren't doing so because their motivations are racist. Now, people say, well, racism depends on intent. You have to intend for it to be racist for it to be racist. I disagree. I'll tell you a quick story. When I was a younger lad, I worked in the food industry. I worked for a food distributor that specialized in pizzerias and Italian restaurants. I would be the guy who would go to the restaurant and sell them their food. So I'd want to sell them their mozzarella cheese, their pepperoni, pizza sauce, all that jazz. That's what I did. And at one point, we actually had an exchange student from Italy who started working there. I don't know if I don't know what kind of program he was on because we would have been adults at the time, so it wasn't like in high school. But we became friends. And he spoke English, with an accent, but he's very much Italian. And at one point we were talking about stuff and he said the N-word. And I was like, dude, don't say that. He's like, why? What's wrong with the word? He didn't know. He was a foreigner. There's really no way he could have known how offensive that word was. And in fact, we assume that everybody knows about American slavery. No, they don't. Like this guy, like he actually asked me, where do your ancestors come from in Africa? And I said, I don't know. He's like, why not? And I said, well, because my ancestors were slaves on both sides. So all that history got erased. All the names, they got erased. The only history I know of is the history of here in America, but I don't know about from Africa. And he was shocked. And he was like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to hear that. I was like, well, it is what it is. But I'm explaining that to let you know this guy had no idea what he was saying. And he says, why can't I say that word? And then I explained it to him, and then he understood. Now, was him saying that word racist? Yeah, it's a racist word. But he wasn't trying to be racist. He didn't know what he was saying. It was unintentional. And I think a lot of times when people say things that are racially questionable, they're not doing it on purpose. A lot of people are just genuinely ignorant. And you know how the saying goes, never attribute to malice that which can be explained by ignorance or stupidity. Sometimes people are either ignorant or they're stupid. Not everybody actually means to offend. So when I talk about these laws, they do disproportionately impact Black people. So it's been shown that not only were these laws intended to keep Black people from owning guns, they still disproportionately prevent Black Americans from becoming gun owners, especially in major cities with high Black populations, especially if you're talking about like DC, Chicago. We love to talk about Chicago, right? But even LA and other cities that have prohibitive gun laws, that's how things work out. And I'll explain why in a second. But here's the first example I want to talk about. And I actually talked about this on one of my live streams a few weeks ago. And there's an issue. There's a Supreme Court case, right? And the Supreme Court case is the New York Rifle and Pistol Association versus Corlett. And the plaintiffs in this case are arguing that New York's system for issuing permits is unconstitutional. Now, just in case you don't know how New York works, they are not a shall issue state. So they have whatever, hoops you got to jump through to get a carry permit in New York. Even if you jump through those hoops, if the authorities don't feel like you have a good enough reason to own a gun, they will reject you. It's completely up to the discretion of the New York State government official you are dealing with. So if you come in and you've done all the paperwork, paid all the fees, but he just doesn't like the cut of your jib, he can just turn you down for any reason whatsoever. You have to prove to them that you have a good reason for having a permit. And there are other states that work that way as well. I believe California does, and some others. That's different from how it is here in Texas. If you want to get a license to carry, Texas is what's called a shall issue state. And what that means is that when you go through the proper procedure, when you fill out the right paperwork, when you do the testing, when you do the class, Texas shall issue you a license to carry, even if they don't like the shirt that you're wearing, even if they don't like the cut of your jib, they can't not give you a license. So this group is arguing that this is unconstitutional, especially because this can be used to discriminate against Black people. If you don't like Black people, you're not going to give them a gun. You're not going to give them a license. And actually, there's a group called Black Attorneys of Legal Aid who filed what's called an amicus brief in this case. An amicus brief, for those who don't know, is basically a filing. It means friend of the court. It basically means that you're not the plaintiff. You're not actually suing. You're not involved in the case, but you want to give information or opinions to inform the court so that they can make a more informed decision. So Black Attorneys of Legal Aid, they filed this amicus brief. And it points out, I need to take some time to actually read the whole thing, but it points out a lot of the ways in which New York has implemented this licensing scheme in a way that discriminates against Black and brown Americans. Part of it, they said, quote, "For our clients, New York's licensing regime renders the Second Amendment a legal fiction. Worse, virtually all our clients whom New York prosecutes for exercising their Second Amendment rights are Black or Hispanic." And then it says, New York enacted its firearm licensing requirements to criminalize gun ownership by racial and ethnic minorities. That remains the effect of its enforcement by police and prosecutors today. So, by the way, this group is not a conservative group. I mean, I'm not saying they're socialists, but they're probably more affiliated with Democrats, but they weren't having it. So they filed this amicus brief, and hopefully the Supreme Court will take a look at what they said, and they can essentially use that information to help them render a decision. So we'll see how this case turns out. I am going to be following it. But I also did an interview with a woman named Amy Swearer. It is on my audio podcast. So check that out. Very good interview. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcast or Stitcher or Google Podcasts. It's on there. And she is a lawyer who works with the Heritage Foundation. And she focuses primarily on the Second Amendment and preserving it. And when we talked about the racial issue, when it comes to skin color and being able to obtain a weapon, she kind of gave me some insight into how things went for her because she's in DC when she had to get her permit. And she said that it cost her about $600 or $700 to get the permit. That's a lot. To give you a contrast, here in Texas, to apply for a license to carry, it's $40. In DC, $600 or $700. And you'll have more expenses when you go to take classes, but still, it's not nearly this much when you have to take the class to get the LTC. She says it took her about 6 months from start to finish. She had to take a lot of days off of work because you have to do range training. She also had to take a few half days off work to do the range training because there are no ranges in Washington, D.C. So if you don't have a car, you're asked out. But she said that while this process was an inconvenience for her, but it wasn't nearly as prohibitive as it would have been for a Black person. she said, she wasn't like, she didn't have to choose between getting her gun permit or paying her rent that month. And she's not, in some of the more dangerous parts of DC, worrying about, walking out the door. And if you know anything about DC, yeah, that's where our federal government is. But you go 5 minutes in a certain direction and you are in the ghetto. Like, you are afraid. Like, you better not stop your car. Like, it's no good. So you can understand how, for a Black person, this would be prohibitive. And so it's a natural consequence that Black and brown people are disproportionately impacted by these laws. It's not just the fact that they have laws restricting gun ownership. It's also the fees that they associate with it. It's also the process that they force people to go through. Chances are, if you have a gun in DC, you are a more affluent white person, maybe you're middle to upper class. And it took her 6 months. So if you live in an area that's not that great and you don't have the resources to get out, you might still want to protect yourself. And what this does is it forces people to get their guns illegally. Now, am I justifying getting a gun illegally? I'm not even going to speak on that. I'm just saying, when people get their firearms illegally, I would say most of them aren't even doing it because they're part of gangs or because they want to deal drugs or they want to shoot people. They're just getting a gun because they want to defend themselves. If they live in a bad area, or if they work in a bad area, or if they have to go through a bad area to get somewhere, they don't want to be unarmed. A lot of Black people own guns, but a lot of them own them illegally. I don't know what the ratio is, between ones that own it legally and ones that don't own it legally. But the idea is that, I can risk getting arrested by a police officer, or I can, because I have a firearm when it's illegal, or I can risk getting shot because I don't have the means by which I can protect myself. So that's actually one of the reasons why Maj Touré created Black Guns Matter. I did an interview with him a few years ago, and he said he ran into a lot of people. He had friends who would catch cases because they would get caught with firearms illegally, and they didn't know the law. They didn't know what hoops they had to jump through in order to get those guns. So that's one of the reasons why he formed Black Guns Matter, so that he can educate Black and brown people living in the inner city on responsible gun ownership and how to avoid getting in trouble with the law, all that stuff. Now, again, when the Democrats put these laws into place, were they saying, yeah, we really don't want Black people to own guns? Probably not. Although I do think some of them are doing this by design. Again, when it goes on for so long and it's so irrational, it's hard for me to believe that it's not intentional. But I would say that most of these people actually think that they're doing a good thing. The thing is, if they really wanted to help Black people, then maybe they would have those gun laws, but maybe for populations living under the poverty line or making a certain amount of income, maybe they reduce some of those fees. Maybe they make it easier, but they don't want minorities to own guns. They really don't want anybody to own guns, but they really don't want minorities to own guns. And if you think about it, I mean, the same people who say that it's okay to have policies that disproportionately keep Black and brown people from obtaining firearms to defend themselves and their families, these are the same people that also say we need to defund the police and have fewer police on the streets. And yes, I know that not everybody who says defund the police means that they want fewer police, but a lot do, and they will be very honest with you about it. So they want fewer police against the will of Black people, by the way, because most Black people want police. And you want to make sure that people can't arm themselves. What do you think they're actually trying to do here? Exactly. I'll let you use your imagination, and maybe I'll give my opinion on that at some point. But you can see why that doesn't make sense, right? Black people, you don't want Black people to have guns, and you don't want them to have the police. What is that going to lead to, right? So yes, gun control is still very much racist. It just looks different. And honestly, that's how a lot of it is with the left and with Democrats. I mean, both the right and left have racists. They've got racists on both sides. And I'm not even going to say that one has more than the other. I probably have experienced the same amount of racism from the left as I have from the right. That's just my personal experience. But the racism looks different. You guys know what Brother Malcolm said, right? He said on the right, a conservative racist doesn't hide it well. They're more open with it. And he actually thought that was less dangerous than the white liberal who happens to be racist, because they hide it better. They pretend to be your friends. So just want to give my 2 cents on that. What do you guys think? Let's see. The name of the support group for the cancel culture community, it's called Counterweight. Like a counterweight. I just wrote an article about them on Liberty Nation, so check that out. Hey, what's up, Saul? Good to see you. I wish I would have been able to catch your whole show. I'm never able to do that in my live stream. But I'll watch the replay. Are you watching on the big screen? I'm on TV? Sweet. Ida B. Wells was a gun advocate, I heard. She has a good quote about the Winchester rifle. Yeah, there's a very deep history of Black people and guns. There's actually a book that I bought, and I still need to read it. It's called The Negro and the Gun, and it details the entire history of the Black community's history with firearms. If you're Black and watching this, don't let them tell you that you can't own a gun or that it's bad to own a gun. You probably don't believe that, but I'm just going to say it anyway. Like, it's okay. If you're responsible, be responsible with it. I mean, when I obtained my weapon, I didn't just do so willy-nilly. I did the research, I did the planning, I did the training. I did training before I got it, and I'm going to continue doing training because I want to make sure that I'm being responsible with my weapon. Let's see. I got more pro-gun after realizing it empowered jeopardized groups, including women the most. Yes, and gun ownership is going up with everybody, but especially with women. Yeah. Women, especially if you live in a bad area, you might want to consider it. Again, get the training to make sure that you know what you're doing with it so that you don't hurt yourself or hurt somebody who doesn't need to be hurt. But I mean, when I've been going to the range, I've been seeing a lot of women learning. Even though I'm here in Austin and Black people only make up 6% of the population, I'm seeing Black people going in there getting their training. So it's happening. And it's a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing at all. In DC, the ghetto can be walking across the street, literally. Yes, I knew a Black business owner arrested in DC for illegal handgun for protection, got 5 years into federal prison, lost house and business. Yes, that story happens all the time, and it pisses me off. Like, if you're gonna bust people for illegally having a weapon and you know they're in a bad area, then you are morally obligated to at least do something to make it easier for them to possess a weapon legally. Not everybody has the money to just up and move, but you want people to expose themselves to being killed because you have some irrational fear of guns. Making it easier to get guns is not going to result in more gun violence. That's been debunked many times over. And defensive gun uses happen all the time. I'm not saying that everybody's going to have to be in that situation. It is rare, but I'm just saying that they do happen commonly. I mean, when you look at it across the entire country, it's more common. So yeah, it's absurd. And now he lost 5 years of his life, and now he can't ever own a gun legally because he's a felon, which is also ridiculous. Like, Martha Stewart can't own a gun because she's a felon. Who the hell is Martha Stewart going to hurt? Well, at least she has lawyers. The average person does not. And they know this. This is why they can do these things. It's obscene. It is completely obscene. If you live in a bad area, you should be able to have a weapon to defend yourself with. Plain and simple. It's common sense. Was it 244, 250? Yes, I did. That was my score. It was beautiful. Again, don't be impressed. It wasn't that hard. I mean, pretty much anybody could pass that test. But I'm still proud of myself anyway. But thank you guys for joining me. I had a great time. And until the next time, keep your minds free.